The last thing you want to hear when you need your auto insurance most is a robot with countless irrelevant menu options. Which is why with USAA Auto Insurance, you'll get great service that is easy and reliable, all at the touch of a button. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
USAA. This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
And welcome back to Undertow Realms podcast, dedicated to tales of the weird and the wicked. I'm your host, director, and producer, Fred Greenhalgh. Today, it is the second part of Carrion Harvest, written by Morgan Sylvia and read by Jessica Taige. Last time, we learned of our protagonist, Sprout, how she came from a simple childhood in Maine, but after her mother was widowed, she remarried a mysterious and ambitious man by the name of Harvey. Harvey and his special corn, which is meant to solve world hunger, delivers a life of luxury beyond their imagination. But the cost of that luxury is higher than anyone will realize, as we learn in part 2 of Carrion Harvest.
We moved to several different neighborhoods and suburbs over the next few years. Each house was bigger, fancier, and more soulless than the last. By the third one, Mama gave up arguing with the HOAs and stopped hanging her charms and spell bottles from the trees. There was no HOA at the fourth house, but by then, she left the gardening to landscapers. Her painting and canning supplies gathered dust in a succession of attics and basements. She wore designer clothes rather than faded jeans and sported real diamonds and sapphires instead of quartz and jade. The only things I recognized from our old life were a few of her seascape paintings that hung on the walls beside overpriced abstract pieces that looked to me like ketchup and mustard stains on a diner counter. Christmas in Aspen, midwinter break in Cabo, spring in Bora Bora. A rush of Instagram-perfect days. We celebrated their first anniversary with an extravagant week in a luxury resort in Maui. I remember looking out over the cabanas and the crowded powder white sands and longing for the cold, thin strip of beach outside our old home. I navigated those years as best I could, but even then I felt something was coming. Other times, I would wake sweating and shaking with the weight and terror of horrific apocalyptic nightmares. I barely remember those dreams anymore. I only recognize them as premonitions when they come true. We weren't the first in our family to have that gift. The sight, Mama called it. Her own mother and grandmother had also been clairvoyants. She told me once that it went far back in our bloodline, but I don't know any more than that. I suppose I never will. Her outlook on life had changed by then, along with almost everything else about her. She explained it to me one night after I woke screaming from one of the death dreams. Her fears and foreboding about my father had driven her to keep him on shore, even knowing that he was a fisherman through and through. In the end, by trying to protect him from his fate, she'd only sealed it. He'd have wanted this for us, she told me one night when I came home distraught after watching a film at school about nuclear war. We're safe with Harvey. I'm scared, I murmured. I'm scared of the bombs. I am too, sweetie, she said, brushing hair off my forehead. But you should never let fear dictate your decisions. What's coming is coming. You can't control that. You can't even entirely control what happens to you. But you can control your own life. How? She kissed my forehead. I'll teach you when you're older. I scrunched my face up, curious. Teach me what? Power, she said quietly. I still remember her face in the glow of my nightlight as she stood to leave. Go to sleep now. I was almost asleep when I heard the rumble of a car coming up the drive and saw headlight beams sweep across the room. I padded to my window and looked down to see the black limousine pulling up to the door. Mama and Harvey got in, and it immediately drove away. I looked at the sky. The moon was dark. Not long after that, Harvey scored another huge win. I remember him coming home with champagne and announcing that we would be moving again. Only this time, we weren't going to a better neighborhood, but relocating to the Midwest. Until then, we'd stayed in the same general area. The last move took us far inland, away from the waves and the tides I'd known my whole life. I felt something tearing in me as we drove away from the sea. The pain was almost physical. The ocean was in my blood. Had been for generations. Those glittering frigid waters had been the only constant in my life. The only thing that, though always changing, had always stayed the same. My father's ashes are in those cold black waves, along with those of my grandparents and great-grandparents and countless other kin. Our final residence, the one I sit at now, took over a year to build. Harvey and Mama chose every detail. They designed a massive modern mansion, equipped with every high-tech luxury one could think of. Huge glass walls and wooden beams and walls gave it an almost lodge-like feel. It sits atop a hill at the end of a long tree-framed drive, looking over rolling cornfields that stretch toward a fat silver river. Although it was new and custom-made, it had been designed to complement the old stone watchtower in the trees beside the house. I hated being landlocked. Sometimes, as I fell asleep, I pretended the sound of wind moving through the fields was waves crashing on the beach. Mama understood my distress, even though I didn't say anything. She helped me decorate my new bathroom in a mermaid theme. Tabitha filled an old blue seashell-shaped perfume bottle with seawater for me and tied ropes of shells around it. It still sits on my shelf to this day. Things had been changing steadily until then, but the final shift, which happened when we moved into the mansion, was fast and dramatic. We'd long had cleaning ladies, pool service, and lawn service, but now we had full-time staff. There were servants to cook, servants to clean, servants to tend the lawn, servants to drive us around, even servants to manage the other servants. Mama had a trainer, a yoga instructor, a stylist, a personal shopper, and an assistant at her beck and call. Harvey's lawyers, advisors, and accountants were always in and out. I suddenly had tutors and riding instructors. Their social life also shifted. There were no old friends here. Their social circle was exclusive. Their guests both richer and more powerful than the people they'd associated with back home. I knew that the fun, loud gatherings like we'd had in our little house by the sea were gone forever. But I hadn't expected this drastic of a change. Mama didn't even cook for their new friends. Those dinner parties were catered, formal affairs. She never lifted a finger in preparation, but to approve menu items and wine lists and occasionally direct the placement of flowers or champagne fountains or ice statues. One thing that didn't change? The limousine pulling up to their door on each new moon, carting them away. Harvey grew richer and more powerful almost by the day. Mama was delighted. "One day," she told him, "one day you will be king." He will never be king. 2 other big things happened that year. My brother Matthew was born, and I was sent to boarding school. Although I was thrilled to finally have a sibling, I didn't get to see him much. I was gone most of the time. We went to Costa Rica for Christmas and then Fiji that spring. When school let out, I went with a friend's family to the Hamptons for 2 weeks, and then it was straight to riding and gymnastic camps. By the time I came home for what remained of my summer vacation, it had been almost a year since I'd spent more than a few days in the mansion that was officially my home. things had changed in the interim. The house had somehow become not more welcoming, but less. It was now ringed off by a high fence, and there was a manned gate at the mouth to our driveway. The place was as cold as it was elegant. Every time I stepped inside those doors, I felt a shadow falling over me. While I didn't exactly love boarding school, at least I had friends there, and I had Cinnamon with me at the school stable. But here, in the place I should have been most at ease, I felt like a guest. I was constantly asking the servants where to find things. I accidentally set the security system off twice before I got the hang of it. Harvey had to show me how to work the smart house controls for my suite. Poor little rich girl. Mama was happy to see me, but she wasn't very interested in painting or dancing with me anymore. I missed the old Mama, the one who wove daisies into my hair and drew roses and butterflies in colored chalk on our sidewalk. This version of Mama only wanted to take me shopping or to expensive restaurants and seemed more interested in spending Harvey's money than in having fun. Back then, I thought the price she paid for this life was the loss of freedom. It was, in truth, something more. She'd taken to drinking heavily. I often found her on the marble terrace or in her den with a bottle of expensive wine from Harvey's prized wine cellar. Often, she would have her tarot cards or books or runes before her. I remember walking past her private den one night. She had fallen asleep watching the news. I think it was the floods in Miami, though I can't be sure. I heard her voice as I passed and thought she was calling me, but when I got to her, I realized she was talking in her sleep, rambling about ice and blizzards. She woke up gasping as I approached and blurted something out, still half asleep. Whiteness everywhere, death in the snow. She drew me to her, sobbing, and told me that she'd been dreaming about my father in that snowbank. From that moment on, I shared the same dream. I was trapped in a cold white cloud like my father, slowly suffocating, flakes falling onto my lifeless open eyes that were the same color as his. The house was never empty, but somehow I was always alone. I didn't know anybody locally, not that it would have helped much, as we were quite isolated. A bodyguard drove me into the city for riding, gymnastics, and violin classes, but aside from that, I was mostly left to my own. I got to know the staff. Actually, I'm pretty sure I annoyed most of them. There was Andy, our gardener, a cheerful, cheeky redhead who often quoted Shakespeare as he worked on the flower beds or tended the perfectly manicured lawn. He was an absolute treasure trove of music, movie and book suggestions, fashion advice, and later, dating tips, and always had a story to tell or some sort of anecdote to share. He was marrying his boyfriend in September, and I think he was even more obsessed with planning their wedding than Mama had been with hers. It was adorable to watch, really. I think he was my favorite. Then there was Krista, the cook. She always had soap operas or talk shows playing in the kitchen and was always chattering on the phone as she cooked. She made amazing salads and grilled cheeses and sometimes snuck me extra cookies or biscuits. I was also quite fond of Eliza, the cleaning lady, a short, squat thing with a sweet face and a kind smile. She always had some interesting updates or story about her family, which was so huge I could never keep straight who was who. I envied her that. The concept of having a large, happy family was entirely alien to me. I quickly grew restless in my princess suite, a bird in a gilded cage. Mama and I had mommy-daughter dates every week, but that only filled a few hours. I could only spend so much time reading, watching TV, and scrolling social media, and unlike Eliza, I wasn't one for long phone conversations. Matthew was still a squalling, sour bundle at the time. So, like any bored child, I took to exploring. I explored the river, getting to know every detail of its banks. I investigated the old stone tower, which offered only a great view of the valley and some old graffiti. I spent days exploring the endless labyrinthine cornfields where Harvey was growing his perfect corn. I loved slipping out of sight and getting lost among the rows. It was also a good place to run. I was joining cross country that year and was starting to train. The plants were 7 or 8 feet tall by then. I often came across unexpected old relics. A rusted old plow, a broken down truck. There were several tall poles, which I puzzled over until I came across one that still held the remnants of a scarecrow. It was wearing a white Metallica concert tee and a plaid flannel shirt. A lump rose in my throat when I saw that. My father had often worn similar clothes. I went there often after that and pretended I was talking to him. Eventually, the cornfields lost their appeal. I started going in the other direction, into the wooded hills behind our house. That's how I met Estelle. One July day, I came across a trail I hadn't noticed before. It followed an old rock wall through the woods behind our house, eventually winding up a hill. At the top, I found myself in a pretty little meadow. As soon as I saw that spot, I felt a sense of peace coming over me. It reminded me of a small park where Mama and I would take Mosh and go picnic and play on summer days. Birds and butterflies flitted around flowering bushes that I recognized from Andy's chit-chat. Rhododendrons, gardenias, hydrangeas, azaleas. I decided then and there that it was my new favorite place. I looked down and saw a pretty white flower. I thought it would look pretty in Mama's hair, and I was bending over to pick it when a voice called out from behind me, "Don't pick that." I was so startled to hear another human voice that I jumped. I spun around and found an old lady watching me, bemused. She reminded me at first glance of a Russian babushka. A long gray braid hung out the back of the colorful bandana she had wrapped around her head. She was carrying a wicker basket, which was full of dandelions. Her face was weathered and wrinkled, brown as leather, but her twinkling eyes shone bright. I stumbled backwards like a nervous deer. She laughed. "You're a jittery one." "Who are you?" I stammered. "And why are you on our land?" She tilted her head, raising an eyebrow. "Your land? You got that backwards, girl. You're on my land." I felt 2 inches tall. My face turned red with embarrassment, and I stammered a reply. "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought this was all ours." "Ours." Her voice evened out. "You must live in that fancy new house on the next hill." I nodded. I didn't mean to intrude. I didn't see a fence or anything. She put her basket down and raised a hand to her eyes, squinting at me. "Course you didn't see a fence. There ain't none. My borders are this stream, a road, a rock wall, and a few iron spikes back there among the cottonwoods and oaks. My family carved these meadows out of the woods, fought the forest back tree by tree. Not sure that ever really made it ours, but that's another debate." She turned and pointed to a huge old oak in the center of the meadow. "That was planted when my great-grandfather was born." I thought of our old apple tree, the old tire swing my father had hung for me from its twisted branches. "It's a pretty tree." I studied it, squinting. Mama used to say that oaks are magic. She used her sleeve to wipe sweat off her forehead, then tilted her head, studying me. "Did she now? Well, she's not wrong. But here's the thing. All trees are magic. Do you know that they talk to each other? They communicate through their roots." I was skeptical. That sounds really weird. No more than folks using watches to talk to their friends or sending phone signals through wires. She had a point. Then again, debate had never been my strong suit. I wasn't sure what to say, so I let my curiosity take over. "Why shouldn't I pick the flower?" "It's endangered, called a white-fringed orchid. You can pick it if you want, but you'll have to sleep knowing you may have driven it into extinction, or at least helped it along the way. You'll have to carry that weight with you rest of your life. Kind of a heavy burden for those skinny shoulders." A forgotten memory rose through my thoughts. My father pretending I was too heavy to lift.
Can't carry you anymore, girl. My shoulders are too skinny. Gonna have to tickle you instead.
A lump rose in my throat. She noticed the change in my expression. Her face and stance softened. You look like you could use a cup of tea. My mouth was suddenly dry, but I hesitated, wary. I'm not going to eat you, she said. Too skinny. And you look like you might eat apples. Do you eat apples? Sometimes. Mama says they're good for keeping doctors away. They are. They also keep me away. She shook her head. Well, that does it. I can't eat you. I'm allergic. May as well invite you in for tea. She hoisted the basket up, balancing it against her hip, and jerked her head towards the winding path that twisted into the forest. Come on, this way. She moved to the trail mouth and stopped to wait for me, caught on the border between shadow and sunlight. I hesitated, pondering. Then I stepped carefully around the flower and followed her into the woods. The canopy was quite thick there and cast the woods into cool green dusk dappled with gold light. Glancing back, I saw the meadow, a pool of bright light beyond the darkness of the forest. I felt a sense of unease and hurried to catch up with her. Soon, we came to another small clearing, this one with a simple craftsman-style house on the other side. It was small, but welcoming, and though it looked nothing like our old cottage by the sea, it reminded me of it. The house and small garage were both painted dark red, trimmed with brown. A huge stone chimney stuck up into the sky. I couldn't see the road, just a long driveway winding through the trees. There were plants and flowers everywhere, starbursts of rainbow petals in colors so vivid they seemed almost surreal. She had plants and flowers not only in the ground, but in raised beds, stone beds, pots, hanging planters, and old pallets, and even tires. Wind chimes, statues, and bird feeders caught sun and wind, adding a whimsical feel. Plump chickens clucked and pecked in a tractor coop. She had a small stone fire pit with a circle of chairs around it. A stone well sat encircled by herbs and flowers and painted stones. Estelle saw me looking at it. That's my wishing well, Estelle said. She reached into a tiny statue of a fox and pulled out a roll of pennies. She peeled the wrapper back, removed a shiny new one, and handed it to me. Go on, make a wish. I think I wished for world peace. I heard a distant buzzing, which grew louder as we moved through the garden. It didn't take long to figure out what it was. The beehives were lined up neatly at the far corner of the garden, neat white boxes in a row, surrounded by more flowering trees and plants. Here and there, a cloud of tiny winged bodies flitted around. I froze, terrified as one buzzed around me. She paused and turned. You allergic? I shook my head, then ducked. Nothing to be scared of then, she said. They won't attack unless I tell them to. The joke went over my head, as did one of the bees. I squealed and ducked, scrunching up my face. I hate insects. She burst out laughing. Good Lord, girl. You need to relax. You're wound tighter than a $2 watch. The bee dive-bombed my head. I took a step back, dodged like a boxer, then raised my hand to swat it. Estelle's eyes flashed. Don't you hurt that bee, she snapped. It's one of my pets. Pets? I gave a disdainful snicker. Bees aren't pets. They sting. They are too pets. I have something like 40,000 of them, and I love each and every one of them. I was unconvinced. I think they're gross. You shouldn't, Estelle said. They're part of the circle of life. Did you know that bees are responsible for keeping us alive? If they didn't pollinate the crops, well, not much would grow. Pretty impressive for a little thing. We have a lot to learn from bees. They work together as one for the good of all. and they communicate by dancing. Dancing? This piqued my interest. What do you mean? When they go to find nectar, they memorize the directions in the form of a dance. Then they return to the hive and dance for the others to tell them where to go. And if they have to find a new hive, they'll dance those directions out too, so the hive can vote on it. I stared at her. Bees can't vote. They can and do, in their own way. They're really very interesting. Plus, they have cute little butts, or behinds. She reached over to a nearby occupied flower and held out a finger. The bee crawled across her wrinkled hand. Everything on this earth has a purpose. Even the tiniest insect has a role to play. I thought of the pest control company that sprayed Cinnamon's barn. I'd seen them come out in white protective suits, their faces encased in plastic. When we'd moved, Harvey had chosen Cinnamon's new stable because they were diligent about spraying for bugs and parasites. Even flies and worms? Even flies and worms. They turn death into life, make the soil rich so things will grow, Estelle said. She jerked her head towards the door. And my bees make the best honey around. Come and taste it for yourself if you don't believe me. I followed her inside, careful to latch the screen door behind me. I remember the moment I stepped into Estelle's place for the first time, clear as day. Looking around, I felt more at home in her tiny habitat than I did in the cold mansion. It was warm and welcoming and cozy. Everything our place wasn't. Old photos and paintings covered the walls, and wildflowers and vases brightened the shadowy interior. The sofas were piled with pillows and blankets, most patterned in black, red, yellow, and white. Dream catchers hung in the windows, before and between hanging plants. Bouquets of daisies and wildflowers added pops of cheer here and there. An old-fashioned cook stove sat in one corner, doubling as a plant rack. A parakeet chirped at us from an antique iron cage. I immediately felt at home. Estelle motioned me to a pine farmer's table that sat before a big window, then went into the kitchen. I sat on a slightly wobbly chair. A moment later, something touched my leg. I jumped back, startled, only to find a fat yellow cat staring at me. I held a hand out, and it sniffed my fingers, then shoved its forehead against my knuckles. "Do you live here alone?" I asked. "Except for Rufus," she said, motioning to the cat, "and my birds and fish." I meant, do you have family? Nope. She opened a cupboard, rustled around in it. Not immediate family, anyway. I'm a widow and childless. But I have 4 brothers, 2 sisters, and more cousins, nieces, and nephews than I can count. They all keep telling me I should sell the land and move closer to them, but I'm not budging. I didn't understand what she meant at the time. It wasn't until later that I found that she had refused to sell to Harvey even as he bought up everything around her. Her land was a bird-shaped nick in the side of our property map. "What kind of tea do you want? Mint? Oh, chamomile. You look like you need chamomile. With blackberry honey." She hesitated. "What am I thinking? It's sweltering out. You'll want iced tea, of course." She pulled a pitcher out of the fridge. I keep cold herbal tea in the fridge all summer. Can't be without it. That and cucumber water. Good thing my nephew brought my grocery order over today, as I was almost out of both. I watched her fill 2 glasses with ice and pour amber liquid into them. "How long have you lived here?" "All my life." She put the glasses on the table, went back to the cupboard, and rummaged around a bit more. "I was born here, and I'll die here. I grew up running through those fields, walking the old wooden fences, just like my daddy and grandpa did before me." I heard the clatter of plates. "We lost most of the farm in the 80s. I scratched Rufus's ears, got him purring. "How?" "Corruption, that's how. She gave a bitter laugh. Farming isn't what it used to be, girl. Nowadays, farmers have to spend tens of thousands for seed and hope they make the money back, which isn't easy. Stores pay pennies on the dollar, then turn around and charge 5 times what they pay. And corporations are buying up huge chunks, putting the little family farms under. Daddy started having to get loans. It worked okay until the tornado came through and destroyed his crops. It was too late to replant, so he lost everything that year. Couldn't pay the taxes or the seed loans. Most of the land was auctioned off then. What was left was slowly sliced up in the years after, piece by piece. She placed a plate of cornbread on the table and sat down. I still remember my daddy's eyes welling with tears. He knew the auctioneer that sold the place. They grew up together. I think that was what hurt him the most. He died not long after that. Doctor said it was a heart attack. They weren't wrong. A broken heart can't work right, and some just don't heal. Why did you stay? This is my home. Estelle spread thick butter on a piece of cornbread. I kept most of it up, but then the taxes caught up with me. Now, there's just about 10 acres left. It's enough for me. I leave most of it to the critters. I sipped the tea. It was like drinking sunshine. She studied my face, her eyes sharp. You look like an old soul. Wise eyes. Didn't know Harvey had a daughter, much less one with wise eyes. You know Harvey? A bitter smile turned the corners of her mouth up. Everyone knows Harvey. It wasn't a compliment. A flush of shame heated my cheeks. He's not my father. I mean, not my real father. My real father died. Estelle's face softened. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I still miss my own daddy sometimes, and he's been gone near half a century now. And just like that, the dam inside me burst. I don't know what triggered the sudden volcano of words. I hadn't spoken or cried about the loss in years, but suddenly I was just babbling. Everything spilled out of me. I told Estelle about my father, Harvey and Mama, Matthew, Tabitha, and Cinnamon. I even told her some things about my friends from school. Granted, I was about 9 or 10 then, so it's not like I really had any deep, dark secrets. I just felt as safe with her as I did with Tabitha. I was immediately comfortable in her presence. We talked for hours. I didn't realize how much time had passed until I looked outside and saw the sun touching the treetops. I stood up. I should get back. Mama and Harvey are having a dinner party. You don't sound very excited. Parties are supposed to be fun. Theirs aren't, I said sourly. She smiled. Well, you come back anytime, she said. Nice to have some company. I walked back wondering if I too could someday dance my way home. After that, I visited Estelle as often as I could when I was home, sometimes every day. When it was cold or rainy, we sat at her kitchen table playing cards or sorting herbs as she told stories. I don't think I ever spent an hour in her presence without learning something. She taught me how to can as the rain pattered against the windows of her cottage, told me about her life when snow drifted in lazy flakes through the sky. When I spoke of my budding desire to become a violinist, she brought an old fiddle down from the attic and taught me the old folk songs. I loved her place. Every time I set foot inside it, I felt an immediate sense of peace. The memory of the day I burned it to the ground is a glowing ember in the ashes of my soul.
Hey, Undertow listeners, Fred here, wishing you happy spring. It is time to shake off the cobwebs and go out and see the world. I'm currently contemplating a long weekend in New York City, or perhaps New Orleans, and whether it's the Big Apple or the Big Easy, I'm treating myself to the luxe upgrades I deserve with Quince's high-quality travel essentials at fair prices. For example, I am eyeing their linen button-up shirts and also their beach shorts, light and breathable, sustainably sourced from Europe and almost 70% less than traditional retail price. They've also got amazing suitcases, travel duffels, and fun little travel details like leather luggage tags and passport holders. I'll be grabbing a minimalist leather money clip wallet myself to keep my travel credit cards and ID handy while out there exploring. And I love how Quince passes savings on to us by cutting out the middleman and works directly with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. That is a winning combination. For your next trip, treat yourself to the luxe upgrades you deserve from Quince. Go to quince.com/undertow for 365-day returns, plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/undertow to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/undertow.
There are many ways to entice a potential new customer with flashy branding and calculated marketing strategies. But at the end of the day, the success of a business comes down to the ability to close the sale. And for businesses like Thrive Cosmetics, Allbirds, or Skims, it's what goes on behind the scenes, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple that makes the difference. For them and for millions of businesses, that difference is made with Shopify. Businesses that want to grow, grow with Shopify. Because if your goal is growth, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And Shopify will make sure you're ready. On the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Nobody does selling better than Shopify. And with Shop Pay, they boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. It's no wonder Shopify is home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/realm, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/realm to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/realm.
This episode is brought to you by Temptations Cat Treats. Your cat will come running for the perfectly irresistible Temptations Creamy Puree and Temptations Lickable Spoon Cat Treats. The best time to feed lickable cat treats to your cat is anytime. Feed by hand for a playful moment, in a bowl for a creamy treat, or as a topper to make mealtime fun. Visit TemptationsTreats.com to learn more.
Harvey's descent into madness mirrored his rise to power in that it was slow and gradual until it wasn't. He became increasingly unhinged and was completely focused on his research. By the time Matthew started kindergarten, it was an unspoken rule that his work was never to be questioned or criticized. I came home one night to find Mama and Harvey celebrating with champagne. Harvey was smiling, his eyes glittering. I just got a chunk of land for pennies on the dollar. I looked out at the shaggy fields and wondered why he wanted so much corn. They celebrated long into the night. We will do great things, he told Mama, the mad gleam in his eye. We will defeat death and hunger. I don't know whether to laugh or cry when I think of those words now. That year, he was completely obsessed with buying more land. He snapped up the farms around us left and right. It seemed that every week some realtor or lawyer was coming by with papers to sign. The conversations were muted and subdued, but I sometimes heard snippets of them as I passed by his office. Patent registration, analysis of variants, Lot 13 molecular manipulation, DNA splicing, gene mapping, cellular modification. Harvey built the lab while I was away at school. Neither he nor Mama said anything about it. I just came home to find an austere, modern, 2-story, industrial-looking building in what had been an empty field when I left. It was across the street from the mansion, but at a diagonal. You couldn't see it from the first 2 floors of the mansion, but my bedroom and game room, both of which were on the 3rd floor, offered a clear view of its roof, parking lot, and the security guard station. More staff arrived that year, maids and cooks and gardeners, assistants and shoppers and trainers. They bowed their heads as Harvey passed, as though he were some lord. I also got used to seeing bodyguards and security teams around. I stood by, helpless, as the mage became duke, became prince, became king. Mama, too, was transforming. She went to Beverly Hills several times for plastic surgery. We got used to seeing her face swollen and bruised, her body wrapped in bandages. Matthew was terrified at first. He thought she was a mummy, like something out of his storybooks. I remember cuddling him as he cried. Mama tried to soothe him, but she was pretty out of it and only scared him more. Finally, I brought him to Estelle's. She wasn't home that day, but I showed him the wishing well and told him to wish for Mama to heal quickly and well. And she did. She grew more beautiful and more distant by the day. She spent most of her time getting manicured or massaged or working out with her trainer. I often found her just sitting quietly in a daze, staring out over the fields, her eyes vacant and black. I knew she was struggling, but I didn't understand why. She didn't seem to notice that her old friends never called anymore. That winter, I choked on a chestnut Krista had roasted on an open fire. Matthew happened to run past as I was popping it into my mouth, and he startled me enough to make me inhale not just air, but the nut. I started flailing, pounding on things, gasping for air, but I didn't know what to do. I tried to walk towards where Mama and Harvey were, but the world spun black and red. The last thing I saw was the floor coming at me. I heard the crash of a vase I knocked over as I fell. The next thing I saw was Harvey's face over mine. He did CPR, got me breathing again. That was my first death. I happened to be in the kitchen one night when Mama and Harvey came home from one of their mysterious outings in the limousine. I'd woken, shaking and sweating from one of the winter dreams of Papa's corpse staring through the snow. Unable to fall back asleep, I'd gone downstairs to get a smoothie from the drink fridge. I was pondering ice cream flavors when I heard the beep of the security system, followed by the sound of footsteps. I could hear Harvey's steps as he climbed the curving stairway to their suite, which was on the second floor. The clack of Mama's stilettos drew closer, but I assumed she was headed for her den. Instead, she came into the kitchen, startling me as much as I startled her. I froze when she stepped into the light. She was wearing a crown of flowers and had some sigil drawn onto her forehead. I could tell she'd been drinking. She swayed a bit on her feet. "What are you still doing up?" "I just woke up," I said, gesturing at her face and head. "What is all that?" She seemed to have forgotten the flowers. She touched her head, dazedly, and took the crown off. "I was the Spring Queen," she said. Her voice slurred a bit. "What are you doing up? Is there any of that butterscotch ice cream left? I have a sweet tooth." I stepped aside so she could check the ice cream freezer and then drew a sharp breath. There was something dark splattered on her face. Mama saw my expression change. "What is it? You're white as a sheet." I swallowed, gesturing awkwardly. "You have something on your cheek." She took a compact out of her purse to check. Her face paled, and that's how I knew for sure what it was. Blood. She couldn't look me in the eye. "The chocolate fountain misfired," she said lightly. I knew she was lying. It was hard to read her face since the surgery, hard to recognize it, but I heard the deception in her voice. A moment later, she drew herself together and smiled sweetly as though nothing was wrong. "Go to bed, honey," she said. "Let's get sushi this weekend." Then she walked away, her sleeveless silk dress swishing against her legs. There was another blood stain on the back of her arm. Harvey's fields grew lush and green that summer. By the time I turned 16, Harvey was both extremely rich and extremely powerful. He and Mama lived a life of ridiculous extravagance. He bought homes in Dubai, in Paris, a castle in Germany, a beach house in Hawaii. I only saw most of them once. Some I never visited at all. Even when my school schedule allowed, I preferred to stay home and spend my time with Estelle. She taught me a lot as I grew from a spindly, wary child into a quiet adolescent and eventually a young woman. She stepped seamlessly into the voids and vacancies Mama had left behind in her transformation. She taught me the uses of herbs and flowers, taught me how to fish in the creek and how to garden with the moon. She often told me old stories or anecdotes. One quote stands out in memory. It was a bright day in early fall, and we were tending to her flowers. "The Great Spirit is our father, but the earth is our mother. She nourishes us. That which we put into the ground, she returns to us." I remember her inspecting a flower, popping a dead head off. "My grandmother used to say that. She taught me everything is connected, and she was right." I helped her plant her flowers and vegetables the following spring. When she made a salad out of that produce, I was struck by the sheer joy of biting into something I had grown. I remember I ran home, wanting to share that with Harvey. But when I got there, he was in his office with several of the gray, cold lords. I heard snippets of their conversation as I passed. "It died. What about the offspring?" A pause. "Avoid the sedation and painkillers next time." He looked up and saw me standing at the door. A look of anger darkened his face. He scowled, strode across the floor, and slammed the door. Something in me went cold. I should have put that knife into his eye years ago. Harvey had a long shadow by then. It eventually cast the whole world into darkness, but I was the first of our family to fall under its gloom. That happened on a sunny Tuesday in April. I was walking into the stable, cheerful and excited. Some of my friends and I were planning a trail ride down to a nearby lake, and I'd just gotten a new saddle for Cinnamon that I was eager to try out. I went into the tack room to store my things when suddenly I found myself being shoved into the wall of lockers. My friend Anna was standing there when I turned around, her eyes searing into mine with a burning hatred I'd never seen before. I froze, confused. "Anna, what's wrong?" She shoved me again. "Who the fuck do you think you are?" I wasn't sure if she was serious or joking. I half expected her to start laughing at any moment, but the rage in her eyes told me it was no joke. I was so shocked I was speechless. We'd been riding together for years and were close social media friends. We'd gone to the movies together just the week before. I had invited her to come to the Bahamas with us that fall. "What are you talking about?" And then it hit me. I just got a chunk of land for pennies on the dollar. My stomach churned. Anna pushed me again, putting her face right up to mine. "Bitch," she hissed. "Your piece of shit father just ruined my family. He sued my father because his poison corn pollinated our crops. We didn't plant that crap, didn't want it, but the wind or the bees or whatever seeded it on our land, and he fucking sued us for it. We're about to be fucking homeless now. Because of you, we just lost a farm that had been in our family for 200 years. We lost everything. I not only can't compete in the regionals, I have to sell ginger. The only reason I'm not pounding the crap out of you is I can't have a mark on my record, cunt." With that, she picked up a soda bottle and threw some on me. Then she stomped off. I looked out the tack room window into the stable aisle and saw her sobbing into the shoulder of another one of our riding group. The others, the girls who had been my friends for years, glared back at me, their faces filled with hate. I didn't even ride that day. I gave Cinnamon a carrot and called the driver back, my eyes welling with tears. We were halfway home when I got a call from the stable manager telling me they were ending my lease agreement and that I'd have to take Cinnamon elsewhere or sell her to them as a lesson horse for younger riders. Mama wasn't home when I got back, so I went to the lab looking for Harvey. I'd never been there before, having little interest in seeing the precious corn. But that day, he wasn't answering his phone, and I was absolutely frantic about Cinnamon. The guard at the outer gate sometimes worked at our house, so he knew me. He let me through without question. But as soon as I opened the main door, I found myself shooed out by a different guard, a huge, burly man I'd never seen before. He had a bushy red beard, so I dubbed him Redbeard. "You're not allowed in here, young lady," he said. "I'm Harvey's stepdaughter," I told him. "You've no right to keep me out." He stepped back with an exaggerated bow. I glared at him, then walked past him to a modern-looking reception area. The receptionist called Harvey to let him know I was there. He texted me immediately, but only to tell me to return to the house. Less than an hour later, Harvey came home in a rage, screaming at me. I was told that by simply standing in the office in my riding boots, I had put the place at risk of contamination. "You put everything at risk," Harvey hissed. "How many times have I told you?" I was shaken to the core. He'd rarely raised his voice to me, but that time I saw the fury in his eyes. The next day, he accepted the offer for Cinnamon. I ran to Estelle's, bawling. She took one look at my tear-stained face and immediately pulled me in for a hug, then sat me down on her sofa and explained what was going on. Apparently, it was no secret. Everyone knew but me. Harvey's seed had spread through the wind and cross-pollinated with the local farmers' crops. His lawyers sued Anna's father for unauthorized use of patented seed. They dragged out the legislation, drove the family into bankruptcy, and bought their land for pennies on the dollar at auction. Anna's family, being quite well off themselves, hadn't told her until that day, as they'd felt confident they would win. They hadn't. "There's a storm coming, dear," she said. "And I don't mean a tornado or a hurricane." I sat there sobbing. She held out a tissue. There was a spider on the box. I jumped away from it, shrieking. Estelle saw the spider and held out her hand. "Well, there you are, Kyle. I've been looking for you." I was surprised enough to forget my tears. "Kyle?" She nodded. "He usually stays in the spider plant, ironically, but I think my nephew scared him the other day. I haven't seen him all week." She looked more closely. "He's certainly been eating enough. See how big his abdomen looks? That means he's overfed." I laughed through my tears. "You have strange pets. I understand the bees now, but spiders?" Estelle's smile never reached her eyes. "They're friends. This cute little guy is a jumping spider. He helps me keep the fruit flies under control. They're pretty interesting. Did you know that some of these guys only have to mate once in their lives? After that, they can lay clutch after clutch. Once a female has mated, if another male approaches, she'll kick him in the face and run off. Can't say I blame her." I giggled despite myself. "Spiders aren't cute, though. They're creepy." The spider, as though on command, waved its arms. "He wants to play," Estelle said. She put her finger down before it and moved it around, making silly noises. To my amazement, the spider jumped back and forth. I'm assuming it was some predatory or defensive instinct, but it really did look like it was playing with her. And just like that, I became fascinated with spiders. At that moment, everything she'd been trying to teach me clicked. Until that point, I'd rolled my eyes when she talked about the benefits of bees and worms or spoke of them as living beings, part of the earth. I'd never seen it for myself. It hadn't really sunk in. I hadn't let it. But that cute little jumping spider somehow changed my worldview. I thought of the sterile barn Cinnamon was at and realized I'd never seen a single fly or spider there. I went home that night and found Andy spraying chemicals on the perfect red roses in the back garden. The next day, I dug into the soil. Nothing moved. Rebellion is, for many, a rite of passage, a trial by fire on the way to adulthood. Some girls run away, drink, do drugs, sneak out, whatever. Those things weren't really me. I was too shy and quiet back then. My rebellion? I started buying insects. Harvey was still adamantly against us having any pets because of both his allergies and a growing fear of contamination. Until then, Cinnamon had filled that void. But now, she too was gone. I felt something missing. I knew I couldn't get away with keeping a cat or dog, but reptiles and insects would be contained in their own habitats. I had my own credit card by then. Harvey never looked at the bills himself. He left that to accountants. My room was more of a suite, with an attached dressing room. I soon turned it into something of a menagerie. Andy helped me install the shelves and tanks I ordered and set up the decor and habitats. He also drove me to various pet stores and helped me coordinate the mail deliveries for the ones I ordered online. I ordered scorpions, stick insects, an orchid mantis, diving beetles, hissing cockroaches, some scarab beetles, and 2 giant snails. I had 2 bearded dragons, a leopard gecko, and a few frogs. The spiders were my favorites, though. I found them all fascinating. I bought as many different kinds as I could. Orb weavers, black widows, huntsman spiders, jumping spiders, and several tarantulas. My cobalt blue tarantula was beautiful, but aggressive, while my Chilean rose and Mexican redlegs would calmly sit on my hand. I even bought a camel spider, but soon learned that solifuge arachnids that are somewhere between spiders and scorpions were a bit too terrifying to look at. My favorites were the jumping spiders. I spent hours playing with them. I didn't see it at the time, but I understand why they fascinated me so much now. I was as despised as they were. What Harvey and his lawyers did to Anna's family was only the first of many such schemes. They repeated the same attack again and again. The next time I was in town, a boy I'd never interacted with shoved me into a clothing rack at the store and hissed into my ear that they'd starve before planting our poisoned crops. Mama had soup thrown on her at a restaurant, and Krista quit suddenly. Less than a month later, Harvey announced that he'd bought yet another farm. He spoke without a drop of remorse, merely shrugging when I asked what will happen to the farmers. They knew they took risks every year. Not enough crop sales to pay off debt, too much debt to buy seed. That's not my fault. Matthew came from soccer camp with a black eye and a split lip. I felt really bad for him. He'd always been kind of a brat, as he'd been starting to act a bit spoiled. Mama and Harvey had decided on military school for him, once he was old enough, and he couldn't wait. I hadn't really felt close to him until then. I tried to see something of myself in him, something of Mama, but until then, I only ever saw a miniature Harvey staring back at me. But that day, he just looked sad. Later that night, he came up to me and asked me flat out if everyone hated me too. My heart melted. "Come on," I told him. "Want to see some cool bugs?" His eyes lit up. I showed him my pets. He loved them, particularly the scarab beetles. He listened raptly as I told him about them, that my jumpers only needed to mate once to have several clutches of babies, that scorpions had been around since before the dinosaurs and often danced before mating. He soaked it up like a little sponge. From that day on, he was a little shadow to me when he was home. I often found him playing with my pets. He spent hours naming them and watching them. I eventually got him his own ant farm, which I kept with the others. The world beyond our walls continued its nosedive into collapse. We hovered on the brink of World War III for so long that it all became normal. Wars, shootings, earthquakes, floods, riots. These things blipped past on the news so fast we could barely keep up. Mama even became hesitant about going into the city. She said it wasn't safe anymore with all of the bombings and shootings and kidnappers. I had the death dreams nearly every night that summer. I thought maybe things would be okay once I got back to boarding school, but only a week after I returned, someone hacked into my social media accounts and posted a bunch of lies about me, including fake porn. I started getting rape threats and death threats through private messages. Someone held Matthew's head underwater at his school's pool. We were both pulled from school and took our lessons online or from tutors. The feeling of dread never went away after that. It faded into the background and eventually became a part of me.
And that was part 2 of Carrion Harvest. The cost of Harvey's special corn and his tactics to build his empire of land come at mounting costs, as we'll learn more next time here on Undertow. Carrion Harvest was written by Morgan Sylvia, performed by Jessica Taige, with editing and sound design by Rory O'Shea. Produced by yours truly, Fred Greenhalgh, as a Dagaz media production for Realm. Undertow is a production of Realm, hosted by Fred Greenhalgh. Executive produced by Fred Greenhalgh and Molly Barton.
I'm Amy Nicholson, the film critic for the LA Times.
And I'm Paul Scheer, an actor, writer, and director. You might know me from The League, Veep, or my non-eligible for Academy Award role in Twisters.
We love movies, and we come at them from different perspectives.
Yeah, like Amy thinks that, Joe Pesci was miscast in Goodfellas, and I don't.
He's too old. Let's not forget that Paul thinks that Dune 2 is overrated.
It is.
Anyway, despite this, we come together to host Unspooled, a podcast where we talk about good movies, critical hits,
fan favorites, must-sees, and in case you missed them.
We're talking Parasite to Home Alone.
From Grease to The Dark Knight.
We've done deep dives on popcorn flicks. We've talked about why Independence Day deserves a second look.
And we've talked about horror movies, some that you've never even heard of, like Ganja and Hess.
So if you love movies like we do, come along on our cinematic adventure.
Listen to Unspooled wherever you get your podcasts.
And don't forget to hit the follow button.
Hey folks, we're the hosts of Comic Sans, the podcast about comics for those who are sans knowledge. I'm Yen, a reader, writer, liver, and breather of comic books.
And I'm Nat. I used to know absolutely nothing about comics, but now...
So actually, I've got a quiz for you.
I still have a lot to learn about comics.
Thank you. On Comic Sans, I make Nat read some of my favorite works in the medium, including Saga, Daredevil, and The Flintstones.
And Yen talks about what makes that comic special. Sometimes it's a story, sometimes it's...
Paneling, gutters, page turns, colorings, lettering, semiotics, juxtaposition.
Okay, Professor, save it for the episodes.
You can listen to Comic Sans on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
You can binge our first 2 seasons. That's over 20 episodes on 20 different comics.
And we just launched Season 3, new episodes every 2 weeks.